You know, Nia, she drawled, her voice carrying clearly over the soft classical music playing in the background. You really are incredibly lucky we even include you in these outings. With your solitary lifestyle, you must get so terribly lonely. Pity goes a very long way in this family. The ultimate betrayal did not happen abruptly. It was a slow, agonizing poison that seeped into my life through the guise of friendship. Kira had been my best friend since college. She was vibrant, loud, and commanded attention wherever she went. When she lost her apartment due to unforeseen financial difficulties, which I later learned was simply her inability to budget her excessive shopping habits, I immediately offered her our guest room. I thought I was providing a safe haven for a struggling friend. I did not know I was inviting a parasite into my sanctuary. Instead, Damon pulled away entirely. He claimed my grief was too heavy for him to process while he was trying to rebuild his career. He called me distant, he called me broken. He used my darkest, most agonizing trauma as a convenient excuse to justify his complete emotional abandonment. On the kitchen island, sitting perfectly centered under the pendant lights, was a single sheet of paper. It was a cowardly, hastily written letter from Damon. He didn't even have the basic human decency to look me in the eyes when he destroyed my life. The letter was a masterpiece of narcissistic justification. He claimed he needed a fresh start with someone who truly understood his ambitions, someone who wasn't weighed down by the past. He told me Kira made him feel alive in a way I no longer could. I built Phantom Analytics from the ground up, starting with a single laptop in a cramped studio apartment and expanding it into a multi-million-dollar empire that terrified corrupt CEOs. I became a ghost in the financial sector, unseen, incredibly lethal, and absolutely essential to the most powerful investors in the country. Damon's latest tech startup, a logistics software company he had aggressively hyped for the past 3 years, was secretly hemorrhaging cash at a catastrophic rate. And, in a twist of absolute poetic justice, Damon was actively attempting to secure a multi-million-dollar bailout from none other than Julian's primary venture capital fund. I ordered a custom-tailored emerald green silk gown that draped flawlessly over my shoulders, selecting a pair of diamond earrings that cost more than Damon's entire fraudulent seed round. I prepared to walk into the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, not as the broken, weeping girl he had abandoned 6 years ago, but as the executioner holding the absolute keys to his total destruction. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom cast a warm golden glow over hundreds of the most successful graduates our university had ever produced. The elite of Atlanta's corporate world were busy exchanging business cards, flashing forced, predatory smiles, and subtly attempting to ascertain exactly how much money everyone else in the room possessed. I wore a custom emerald green silk gown that draped perfectly across my shoulders and cascaded down to the floor in a liquid, unbroken line. I was completely at peace watching the networking games from the periphery when the sudden, shocking impact of ice-cold liquid soaked directly through the thin silk and hit the center of my spine. "Oh my goodness, Nia, I am so incredibly sorry," Kira exclaimed, though her dark eyes were cold, calculating, and practically dancing with malicious triumph. "I didn't even see you standing there in the shadows." "You blend right into the background. 6 years, Nia," Damon announced, his voice intentionally loud and boisterous, perfectly calibrated to draw the attention of the surrounding alumni tables. 6 long years and you are still wearing cheap off-the-rack dresses. I see things haven't exactly improved for you. Leaving you the night before our anniversary for Kira was the absolute best financial and mental decision I ever made in my entire life," Damon declared, pointing a dismissive finger at me. "Look at you. You are still standing here completely alone, still looking completely out of place in a room full of real winners." He pulled Kira closer to his side, offering her a sickeningly sweet smile before turning his harsh gaze back to me. "We are sitting at the VIP table tonight, Nia. We are actively networking with 7-figure investors and industry titans, while you are standing by the service doors drinking sparkling water. You really should have just stayed home. That is a truly fascinating perspective, Damon," I said. My voice was perfectly level, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, yet carrying just enough deliberate volume to easily reach the ears of the eavesdropping guests. "The best financial decision, you say?" I took a slow step forward, invading his personal space, forcing him to tilt his chin up slightly to maintain eye contact. "Because if I recall correctly, 6 years ago you didn't just leave me. You waited like a coward until I was working my graveyard shift at the data center. The second grueling job I took specifically to pay off the massive $40,000 business loan you defaulted on when your first brilliant startup collapsed into absolute ruin. And while I was working double shifts to keep a roof over our heads and prevent the creditors from suing you, I continued, my voice sharp and precise, you systematically drained our joint savings account. Every single dollar I had saved for our future, you took my hard-earned money, Damon, and you used it to buy that cloudy, deeply flawed piece of cheap glass currently sitting on Kira's finger. I shifted my gaze to Kira, looking directly at the ring she was so proudly displaying. So please do not stand here in a poorly tailored rented tuxedo and lecture me about brilliant financial decisions. The absolute only reason you could afford to start your new, glamorous life with her is because you entirely funded it with my stolen paychecks. That is an absolute lie, she hissed, stepping aggressively out from behind Damon's arm. You have always been insanely jealous of me, Nia. You were always so desperate and pathetic, trying to buy his love. Damon simply realized he wanted a real woman, a sophisticated woman who actually belongs in this tax bracket, not some exhausted workaholic. A real woman? I asked, tilting my head slightly. Is that what you call someone who sleeps in the guest room for 6 months, eating the food I bought, pretending to be my supportive best friend, while secretly sneaking into my fiancé's bed the absolute moment I leave for a night shift? You two genuinely deserve each other. A cowardly thief and a treacherous parasite make a perfectly balanced household. You think you are so incredibly smart, don't you? He spat, lowering his voice to a hostile, venomous whisper. You think because you write some code and pay a few bills, you are better than us. I am the CEO of a revolutionary tech firm, Nia. I have a seat at the VIP table tonight with Julian Sterling. He paused, a cruel, triumphant gleam returning to his eyes as he dropped the billionaire's name. Do you even know who that is? Of course you don't. He is the biggest, most ruthless venture capitalist in Atlanta, and he is actively looking for partners. By tomorrow morning, when he signs my term sheet, my net worth will be more than you could possibly make in 10 lifetimes. So enjoy your wet dress and your miserable, lonely life. Well, if it isn't the pathetic ghost of my brother's past, Chinese said, stopping a few feet away and dramatically crossing her arms over her sequined chest. She looked me up and down, her face twisting into a sneer of pure, unfiltered condescension. I saw Damon and Kira walk away looking absolutely disgusted. I had to come see for myself if you really had the sheer nerve to show up here tonight. Hello, Chinese, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly flat, entirely devoid of any emotion that she could possibly feed on. It is a public alumni event. I have every right to be here just like anyone else. She let out a harsh, exaggerated laugh, throwing her head back theatrically. Please, Nia, we both know exactly why you are really here. You are stalking my brother. You heard he was going to be here tonight, rubbing elbows with billionaires, and you dragged yourself out of whatever miserable hole you live in just to try and ruin his evening. It is honestly pathetic to watch. She uncrossed her arms and placed one hand aggressively on her hip, leaning forward as if trying to physically intimidate me. Look at you, standing here all by yourself in a stained cheap dress. Where is your date, Nia? Oh wait, don't tell me, you couldn't find a single man willing to put up with your bitter, desperately lonely energy. You are exactly the same miserable broken woman you were 6 years ago. Just a sad lonely girl who can't get over the fact that a real man leveled up and left her completely behind. Chinese had always been Damon's biggest cheerleader, primarily because she relied entirely on him to fund her extravagant lifestyle. When Damon and I were together, she constantly expected me to pay for her weekly manicures, her lavish weekend trips to Miami, and her absurdly expensive dinners. When I finally cut her off, refusing to be her personal ATM while I was working double shifts, she threw a massive tantrum, calling me cheap and unsupportive of family. Damon is doing better than ever, Chinese continued, her voice rising intentionally so the surrounding affluent guests could hear her clearly. She reached into her shiny silver clutch and dramatically pulled out a heavy key fob, dangling it from her manicured fingers. The unmistakable logo of luxury car brand caught the light perfectly. Do you see this, Nia? This is the key to a brand new Range Rover autobiography. Black on black custom interior. Damon bought it for me last week just because I told him my old car was making a funny noise. That is exactly what a real provider does. He is a multi-millionaire tech CEO now. He takes care of his real, not dead weight like you. She jingled the keys right in front of my face, a triumphant, sickening smile plastered across her glossy lips. Damon and Kira are sitting at the VIP table closing deals that you couldn't even comprehend in your wildest dreams, she bragged loudly. They are building a legacy. Meanwhile, you are standing by the bar alone, drinking water and wishing you were still a part of our lives. You need to leave, Nia. You are embarrassing yourself and you are bringing down the class of this event. What are you doing? Chinese snapped, her triumphant smile faltering slightly as she watched my fingers fly across the illuminated screen with practiced speed. Are you calling an Uber to go home? Because you really should. No, Chinese, my voice dropping into a calm, commanding, authoritative register that instantly demanded attention. I am just quickly verifying a few minor details about this incredible legacy your brother is supposedly building. You see, the wonderfully brutal thing about public financial registries is that they do not care about rented velvet tuxedo jackets or cheap silver sequined gowns. They only care about the absolute truth. A brand new Range Rover autobiography, you said? I asked, tilting my head slightly, my tone conversational but dripping with lethal intent. That is a truly beautiful vehicle, but according to the state registry, this vehicle was absolutely not bought. It was leased, and it was not leased by a multimillionaire tech CEO. I paused, letting the silence stretch for an agonizing second. It was leased entirely under your name, Chinese, with Damon listed solely as a secondary, highly unqualified guarantor. Chinese's face instantly lost a massive fraction of its color. She lowered the hand holding the heavy keys, clutching them tightly and defensively against her side. Shut up, she hissed, glancing nervously at the wealthy people standing nearby who were now openly, shamelessly listening to our conversation. You do not know what you are talking about. You are hacking or making things up. You are insane. I am reading a legally binding public document, I replied calmly, raising my voice just enough to ensure the surrounding audience caught every single devastating word. Now let us look at the specific terms of this incredibly generous gift your brother provided. You signed a subprime, highly predatory auto loan. The interest rate on this vehicle is a staggering 22%. That is not a purchase, Chinese, that is absolute financial suicide. A man who truly cared about his sister would never, ever let her sign a contract with a 22% interest rate. I took a slow, deliberate step closer, backing her slightly into the edge of a tall cocktail table. But it gets even better, I continued, my eyes locking onto hers with merciless surgical precision. According to the lien holder's active status report updated this morning, you are currently 2 full months behind on your massive payments. The legal grace period expired last Thursday. I lowered the phone, staring directly into her panicked eyes. Do you know exactly what that means, Chinese? Stop it, she whispered fiercely, her voice trembling violently. You are lying, you are just a jealous, pathetic liar. It means, I said, completely ignoring her weak, desperate protest, that you are currently driving a ticking repo time bomb. At any given moment, a tow truck is legally authorized to hook up that black-on-black custom interior vehicle and drag it away into the night. In fact, given the high-profile location of this gala and the notoriously aggressive nature of subprime lenders in Atlanta, I would be very, very careful about handing those keys to the valet tonight. You are a monster, Nia, she choked out, her eyes rapidly filling with hot, humiliated tears that threatened to ruin her makeup. You have always been a cold, heartless monster. No, Chinese, I corrected her softly, sliding my encrypted phone smoothly back into my emerald clutch with a deliberate, practiced motion. I am just a woman who actually knows how to read a financial contract. Now, if you will excuse me, I believe you have a highly important VIP table to return to. Or perhaps you should go check the parking lot right now, just to make absolutely sure your incredible legacy hasn't been towed away yet. The clinking of expensive silverware and the low, constant hum of high-powered networking suddenly died down as a sharp, piercing whine of feedback echoed violently through the massive ballroom speakers. The MC, a dignified older gentleman in a classic, well-tailored tuxedo, looked completely baffled but wisely stepped aside rather than cause an unseemly public scene. Good evening, everyone, Damon boomed into the microphone. His voice carried that practiced, deeply artificial confidence of a late-night infomercial salesman, smooth, loud and entirely hollow. I know we are all here tonight to celebrate our beloved alma mater and reconnect with old friends, but I also want to take a brief, important moment to talk about the future. About building something significantly bigger than ourselves. He paced the width of the stage slowly, making deliberate, intense eye contact with the wealthiest-looking alumni seated in the front rows. As many of you know, my technology firm has been making some serious, unprecedented waves in the logistics industry lately. We are fundamentally disrupting the market. We are changing the game entirely. In fact, just this morning we successfully closed a massive Series A seed round. Millions of dollars in capital secured from top-tier investors who deeply believe in my vision. Because I have been so incredibly blessed on this journey, Damon continued, his voice softening into a tone of sickeningly sweet, entirely faux humility. I feel it is my absolute moral duty to give back to the community that shaped me. We cannot take this wealth with us, right? We have to build a lasting legacy. He looked down at Kira, pointing a dramatic, loving finger toward her. And behind every great man is an even greater woman. My beautiful wife Kira has been my absolute rock through this incredible journey. He paused, letting the dramatic tension build. So tonight, in honor of Kira and the legacy we are building together, my company is officially pledging a $50,000 donation to the Alumni Scholarship Fund. But as I look around this beautiful room, I am reminded that not everyone has been as fortunate, he said, his tone shifting from philanthropic to dripping with heavy, undisguised condescension. His eyes scanned the crowd deliberately, bypassing the wealthy tables and locking directly onto me, standing completely alone by the bar in my stained green silk dress. For instance, some people are still stuck in the past, still struggling just to keep up. Nia, I see you standing back there all by yourself. It has been a rough 6 years for you, I know, but hey, every little bit helps, right? Why don't you step up right now and pledge at least $100 just to help keep the lights on for the next generation? Maybe skip buying those cheap off-the-rack dresses for a month and finally give back a little. My heels clicked rhythmically against the marble floor, echoing loudly in the sudden, profound silence of the room. My entire lucrative career was built on walking into burning boardrooms, taking absolute control of the narrative, and neutralizing hostile financial threats with surgical, unemotional precision. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly as he looked at my determined, unyielding expression. "You are really not supposed to be back here during the main event." I reached into my clutch and pulled out my sleek silver work tablet. "I need you to hand over the main HDMI input cable for the center stage projector," I said. My voice was calm, but laced with a heavy, irrefutable corporate authority that left absolutely no room for debate or discussion. "I really cannot do that, ma'am," he stammered, taking a nervous step back. "Only pre-approved presentations are allowed on the main screen. The gala coordinator would absolutely fire me on the spot if I let a guest hijack the feed." "Look at that man standing on the stage," I said, gesturing sharply toward Damon, who was still holding the microphone, his smug smile slowly fading into a look of panicked confusion as he watched me interact with the tech booth. "That man just committed federal wire fraud in front of 500 witnesses by publicly pledging $50,000 he absolutely does not possess. I am a certified financial auditor and crisis manager. If you do not hand me that cable right now, you are going to be legally listed as an accessory to a very messy, very public federal financial crime when the authorities investigate this event." "Hand me the cable now, thank you," I said smoothly, plugging the cable directly into the highly secure port on my tablet. I quickly navigated through my encrypted files, bypassing my own biometric security locks with a few rapid, practiced keystrokes. "What is going on back there?" Damon called out, his voice completely losing its confident boom and sounding slightly reedy and desperate. "Naya, stop making a scene and sit down right now." Damon tapped the microphone frantically, a sharp, annoying thud echoing through the massive room. "Hey, turn the lights back on," he demanded, looking over his shoulder at the massive blank screen looming heavily behind him. "Turn the presentation back on. I am not finished speaking." "Oh, you are absolutely finished, Damon," I whispered quietly to myself, my manicured finger hovering gracefully over the final execute button on my secure screen. "You wanted everyone in this room to know exactly how much you are worth. It is time to show them the real numbers." The projection was so large and so impossibly sharp that even the people standing near the exit doors could read the devastating details. The entire ballroom was frozen in a collective state of profound shock, trying to process the massive cognitive dissonance between the philanthropic billionaire act they had just witnessed and the undeniable legal proof of total financial ruin glowing 50 feet high on the wall. Kira, who had been standing at the edge of the stage soaking in the admiration of the VIP tables, let out a sharp, audible gasp. The wealthy alumni, seated at that table, people who had been laughing and drinking with her just 5 minutes earlier, immediately pulled their chairs away from her as if her sudden, exposed poverty was a highly contagious disease. I stepped out from the shadows of the audio-visual booth, walking slowly to the edge of the elevated platform so I was clearly visible to the entire room. I adjusted the small microphone near my mouth, and when I spoke, my voice echoed through the grand ballroom, cutting cleanly through the chaotic murmurs of the crowd. A massive Series A seed round, you said, Damon. My voice was dangerously calm, echoing with clinical precision. Millions of dollars in capital secured from top-tier investors who deeply believe in your vision. That was a truly beautiful speech, but according to the federal government, you filed for bankruptcy protection exactly 11 hours ago. You do not have millions of dollars, Damon. You do not even have a company anymore. The court has officially seized your corporate assets. Damon snapped his head toward me, pure panic radiating from his wide eyes. Turn it off, he yelled into his microphone, his voice cracking in a high-pitched tone of sheer desperation. Naya, turn that off right now, this is private corporate business. You are hacking my private files. Someone call security, she is projecting stolen documents. I shook my head slowly, resting my hands on the velvet railing of the tech booth, looking down at him like a disappointed teacher. This is a public federal registry, Damon, I corrected him, my voice echoing clearly over his panicked shouts. Anyone with an internet connection and a basic understanding of due diligence can pull this exact document. Which brings me to your very generous $50,000 pledge to the Alumni Scholarship Fund. It is incredibly noble of you to want to give back to the community. Truly it is, but I am curious, Damon, I continued, letting the heavy silence in the room amplify my words. How exactly do you plan to write a $50,000 check to the Alumni Association when, according to Schedule E of your bankruptcy filing, you have not paid your own employees in 6 long weeks? You stood on that stage and bragged about your massive success. I pressed forward, my voice gaining a sharp, authoritative edge that commanded absolute attention from every single person present. You tried to humiliate me for wearing an off-the-rack dress while you performed the role of the generous billionaire giving back to the community. But there are 32 software engineers, developers, and administrative staff members who have not been able to pay their rent, buy groceries, or feed their families for a month and a half because they trusted your leadership. You drained their livelihoods to keep up the grand illusion of your personal success. You stole their labor, Damon. You sat in your glass office pretending to be a titan of industry while the people building your product were checking their bank accounts, praying a paycheck would clear so their children wouldn't go hungry. You are parading around in luxury while your team faces eviction. Lies, Kira shrieked from the floor, pointing a shaking manicured finger at me. She is making this up. Damon, tell them she is making this up. We have the money, we are rich. We have a meeting with Julian Sterling tonight. And let us talk about that beautiful velvet tuxedo you are wearing, Damon, I said, my tone dropping into something far colder. You mocked my silk gown. You stood in front of this entire room and told me to skip buying cheap clothes so I could donate to the fund. You presented yourself as a man who provides, a man who takes care of his family, a man who leveled up. That tuxedo is a custom rental from a boutique in Buckhead, I announced, reading the details off my screen. It costs $1,200 for the night. But you did not pay for it from your corporate account, did you, Damon? Because your corporate accounts have been frozen for weeks. And you did not pay for it from your personal checking account, because that is overdrawn by $4,000. You transferred exactly $1,500 from an account ending in 4721, I stated ruthlessly, reading the cold, hard numbers to the completely silent room. That is your 68-year-old mother's retirement savings account, Damon. You siphoned money from your elderly mother's fixed income just so you could rent a velvet jacket and stand on a stage to pretend you are a millionaire. You took the very money she needs to survive to buy yourself 3 hours of fake respect. You are not a titan of industry. You are a fraud who steals from his own mother and starves his own employees to fund a desperate delusion. If Damon could not fight back with numbers and logic, she was going to drag me down into the absolute mud with them using the only weapon she had left. She grabbed the microphone Damon had dropped on the stage, her knuckles turning white as she gripped it tightly, and she prepared to launch the most vile, desperate personal attack of her entire life to salvage whatever scraps of dignity she could find. She raised the microphone to her lips, her perfectly painted face twisting into a mask of pure, manufactured agony. You think you are so incredibly clever, Nia? She shrieked, her voice trembling with an expertly crafted blend of anger and fake dramatic tears. You come here tonight with your little stolen documents, trying to destroy Damon's reputation, because you are still completely obsessed with him. You are just a bitter, empty shell of a woman trying to drag a successful man down to your miserable level. You stand up there acting so superior, Kira cried out dramatically, wiping an invisible tear from her cheek. But we all know the real reason you are so incredibly hateful. The real reason you never moved on, it is because you are completely barren, that is right. She announced, pacing slightly across the stage, her voice rising to a hysterical, piercing pitch. Everyone look at the great and powerful Naya. 6 years ago, while she claimed she was working so hard for Damon, she couldn't even do the one basic thing a woman is supposed to do. She lost the baby, she had a miscarriage because her body is fundamentally broken. And she expected Damon to just stay with her out of pity. To stay tied to a broken incubator instead of finding a real woman who could actually give him a legacy and build a family. You are just jealous, Kira sneered, the fake tears instantly drying up, replaced by a look of vicious, desperate triumph. You are jealous because I gave Damon a home, a life, and the incredible future you were completely incapable of providing. You can show all the bank statements you want, Nia, but at the end of the day, you go home to an empty house. And I go home with a man who actively chose me over your defective body. That is a very compelling narrative, Kira, I said, my voice dropping to a low, chilling octave that instantly demanded absolute silence from the room. You have certainly mastered the fine art of playing the victim while actively holding the knife. But there is a glaring, massive flaw in your desperate attempt to humiliate me. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy over the crowd. You see, you are standing there, bragging about a man who just publicly humiliated you. A man who stole from his own elderly mother and starved his hard-working employees. If that is the legacy you are so incredibly proud of providing, then you are welcome to every single miserable, pathetic second of it. And as for my supposed jealousy, I continued, my voice rising slightly, echoing with absolute authority through the grand space. Let us talk about what you are actually fiercely defending. You claim you have a future, but we have just established with public records that your husband is completely bankrupt. Your corporate assets are permanently frozen, and you are currently standing on a stage in a rented tuxedo that was paid for with stolen retirement funds. So please do enlighten this entire room. Exactly what glorious future are you so proudly marching toward? Kira, you do not know anything, Nia. You think you have it all figured out with your little spreadsheets. But you are wrong, Damon's company is not dead. We have a lifeline, we have. She pointed a shaking manicured finger at me, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate hope. You think this bankruptcy filing means anything? It is just restructuring, it is a high-level strategic move. Because tonight, right here at this very gala, Damon is officially securing the funding to completely wipe out that debt. That is right, Kira yelled, her voice cracking heavily under the intense strain. You are all going to look like absolute fools for doubting him. Because tonight, Julian Sterling is coming here to personally bail out Damon's company. Kira smiled a twisted, desperate smile. Her chest heaved as she soaked in the stunned silence of the room. She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with a defiant, triumphant fire. That is right, Nia, Julian Sterling. The man who practically owns half of this city. He loves Damon's vision, he deeply believes in our legacy. He is arriving any minute now to sign the term sheet that will make us completely untouchable. So take your little stolen documents and your barren, empty life, and get out of our sight before the real money walks into the room. Damon stood a little taller beside her, his panicked expression slowly morphing back into that arrogant, insufferable smirk. They both stood on the stage, clinging to the name Julian Sterling like a fragile life raft in a Category 5 hurricane, completely convinced that the billionaire was about to walk through those doors and rescue them from the total ruin I had just exposed. Julian Sterling, I said, my voice soft but amplified perfectly by the sound system. The ruthless billionaire investor, the man who is going to completely save your legacy and make you untouchable. That is a truly fascinating plan, Kira. Well then, Kira, I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the ballroom like a finely sharpened blade. Since he is supposedly the magnificent savior of your miserable existence, I suggest you turn around and face the main entrance. Because Julian Sterling is notoriously known for many things in this city, but being late to a slaughter is not one of them. Let us see how much he loves your vision. Listen to me. Damon announced, his voice booming through the speakers with a forced, hearty chuckle that sounded completely hollow. Every great entrepreneur faces a period of restructuring. It is part of the game. You think the biggest tech giants in the world didn't face financial hurdles before their massive breakthroughs? What Nia is projecting up there is nothing more than a strategic legal maneuver. It is a calculated pivot, and it is exactly the kind of bold, aggressive business tactic that attracts top-tier investors like Julian Sterling. He paced the width of the stage, his false confidence seemingly regenerating with every delusional word he spoke. Julian Sterling does not invest in safe, boring companies, Damon continued, gesturing expansively with his free hand. He invests in brilliant visionaries. He invests in people who are willing to risk absolutely everything to disrupt the market. Julian looked at my metrics, he looked at the proprietary software my team built, and he saw the exact same massive potential that I do. He paused, offering the crowd a smug, knowing smile. We had a highly private dinner just last week at his exclusive club in Buckhead. We sat down over $200 steaks and we hashed out the exact details of a partnership that is going to revolutionize the entire logistics sector. That is right, Kira chimed in, her voice shrill and echoing off the crystal chandeliers. Julian Sterling is not just writing us a check, he is becoming a board member. He believes in our family legacy. He told Damon personally that our company is the most exciting venture he has seen in a decade. We are not just surviving this little restructuring phase. We are about to become completely untouchable. She pointed a manicured finger up at the tech booth where I stood watching their spectacular performance. So you can pack up your little tablet, Nia, Kira sneered. You can take your pathetic stolen documents and leave. Because the absolute moment Julian walks through those doors tonight, we are signing a binding term sheet right here on this stage. A multi-million-dollar term sheet that completely wipes out our debt and propels us into a tax bracket you couldn't even comprehend. We are going to be laughing about this night from the deck of our new yacht. While you are still working double shifts and coming home to an empty, barren house, Damon nodded, puffing his chest out even further. The ink is going to dry tonight, he declared proudly, pointing dramatically toward the main entrance. And when it does, every single person in this room who doubted me, who took a step back from this table, is going to be begging for a meeting. But the door will be permanently closed. You are either with us right now or you are out forever. Julian Sterling is coming to crown the new king of Atlanta Tech. Julian is a very busy man, Kira, I said, my voice dropping back into that deadly calm, authoritative register. He manages a global portfolio worth billions of dollars. But one thing I have always deeply admired about him is that he is incredibly punctual. If he says he is going to be somewhere to execute a contract, he is exactly on time. I leaned forward, resting my hands firmly on the velvet railing, looking directly into Kira's wide, terrified eyes. So let us see exactly how much he loves your vision, Kira. Let us see him sign that term sheet and make you completely untouchable. Because if I am not mistaken, he is walking through those doors right now. The heavy double doors at the main entrance, located at the far end of the room, suddenly swung open with a loud, authoritative thud that reverberated through the floorboards. They immediately flanked the entrance, taking up positions on either side of the heavy oak doors, their eyes scanning the crowd with intense, unwavering scrutiny. The tension in the room skyrocketed from uncomfortable to absolutely suffocating. The guests standing near the back of the ballroom quickly scrambled out of the way, parting like the Red Sea to create a wide, clear pathway leading directly from the main entrance to the center stage where Damon and Kira were standing. Damon practically scrambled off the raised stage, his rented shoes slipping slightly on the polished wooden steps as he rushed forward. Kira was right on his heels, clutching her fake designer bag tightly, smoothing her hair and adjusting her posture to present herself as the charming, sophisticated wife of a tech titan. Mr. Sterling, Damon called out, his voice pitching slightly higher than usual, a clear, undeniable sign of his underlying terror. He practically lunged forward, extending his right hand enthusiastically toward the approaching billionaire. Julian, it is so incredibly good to see you again. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We have a highly private room reserved in the back, where we can sit down away from the noise and go over the term sheets. We are just so thrilled you could make it tonight, Julian, she purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness and desperate ambition. Damon has been telling everyone here about our wonderful dinner last week at the club. We are completely ready to finalize the partnership and build this legacy together. I stood completely still in the elevated audiovisual booth, the bright stage lights casting long, dramatic shadows across the wooden floor. The intense anxiety and the highly energy that Damon and Kira had forced into the room completely evaporated, replaced by the solid, unwavering security that Julian always provided me. "Mommy," the boy screamed, his high-pitched, joyful voice pierced the heavy, stunned silence of the grand ballroom with the absolute force of a sonic boom. He threw his tiny arms out eagerly, reaching toward me from across the room. "Mommy, you look so pretty." If the revelation of Damon's bankruptcy was a tidal wave washing over the crowd, this single shouted word was a catastrophic, tectonic earthquake. The wealthy socialites, the cynical venture capitalists, the panicked event organizers, everyone slowly turned their heads, shifting their gaze in unison, from the most powerful billionaire in the city to the woman standing proudly in the tech booth wearing a champagne-stained emerald silk dress. I wrapped my arms tightly around my son, pressing a loving kiss to his soft, warm cheek. "Hello, my sweet, brilliant boy," I whispered, breathing in the incredibly familiar, comforting scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "You look so incredibly handsome in your little tuxedo tonight. You absolutely insisted on matching your dad, didn't you?" Julian leaned in, his lips brushing gently against my ear, but speaking clearly enough for the sensitive microphone to pick up his authoritative voice. "Sorry I am late, my love," he said, his words booming powerfully through the speakers, ensuring that every single person in the room, including the two frozen statues standing near the stage, heard him. "Leo insisted on bringing you your backup dress personally. He was very worried about the spill ruining your night." The absolute, undeniable finality of the moment settled over the grand ballroom like a heavy, crushing lead blanket. The woman Damon had just publicly humiliated for wearing off-the-rack clothing and condescendingly challenged to donate $100 was currently wrapped safely in the arms of the multi-billionaire venture capitalist he had just falsely claimed was his savior, Julian Sterling. "I understand you were just insulting my wife," Julian said, his tone slicing through the heavy silence like a freshly sharpened scalpel. The words echoed off the crystal chandeliers, wrapping around Damon and Kira like a suffocating shroud. Julian did not yell, he did not raise his voice to match the frantic, desperate shrieks Kira had utilized just moments before. True power never has to shout, true power simply states a fact and allows the devastating weight of that fact to crush whoever stands in its path. "I understand," Julian repeated, his dark eyes locking onto Damon with a predatory intensity. "That you were just insulting my wife, the woman you called Barren," Julian continued, gesturing slightly toward me with his intertwined hand, "is the mother of my incredibly healthy son. The woman you instructed to donate $100 to keep the lights on is the primary architect of her own multi-million-dollar corporate empire. You see, Damon, my wife is not just my partner in life. She is the founder of Phantom Analytics, the elite financial intelligence firm that exclusively audits for my entire global portfolio. Every single financial maneuver, every acquisition, every major structural audit my firm conducts runs directly through her desk for final approval before I ever even see it." "Julian, please," Damon stammered, his voice cracking wildly. "Mr. Sterling, I mean, this is all a massive misunderstanding. A terrible, horrible joke." "A joke?" Julian asked, his voice dropping an octave, the dangerous calm settling even heavier over the room. "You consider projecting stolen financial documents and weaponizing my wife's previous medical trauma in front of 500 people a joke? That is a very unique sense of humor, Damon." No, I didn't mean it like that," Damon pleaded, his eyes darting between Julie and me, and the crowd. The wealthy investors crossed their arms, glaring at him with open disgust. Damon realized his social and financial life was slipping through his fingers. He was drowning and defaulted to the survival tactic he knew. He tried to pivot, he tried to act as if the personal insult could simply be swept under the rug of corporate business. "Listen, Julian," Damon said, taking a hesitant step forward, wiping his slick forehead with the sleeve of his rented jacket. "We can clear all of this personal stuff up later, it is just old history, emotions running high. You know how these alumni events get, but let us talk about why we are really here tonight. Let us talk about the business, the term sheet we discussed at the club." "Yes," she choked out, her voice raspy and thin, "the legacy, Julian. You said you loved the vision. You said Damon's software was going to change the industry. We can move past this silly little argument, we are professionals. You want to talk about business, Damon?" Julian asked softly. "Yes," Dame nodded frantically, a sick, hopeful gleam returning to his desperate eyes. "Yes, the logistics software, the seed round. If your firm injects the capital we discussed, we can reverse the Chapter 11 filing by Monday morning. I have the updated projections right here in my briefcase. I can show you the user acquisition models. We are perfectly positioned to dominate the market by the third quarter. You saw the numbers yourself." "Yes, exactly," Damon said, his voice trembling with a sickening mixture of hope and terror. "You see the humor in it, right, Julian? We are businessmen, we know how to separate the emotional baggage from the bottom line. The logistics software is revolutionary, We can make billions together, Damon. The fact that you believe I would ever invest a single solitary cent into your pathetic excuse for a company is genuinely the funniest thing I have heard all year," Julian said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "Let me clarify something for you and for everyone else in this room," Julian continued, taking a slow, deliberate step closer to the stage. "You did not have a business meeting with me last week. You had an interrogation, you sat in my private club, ate a steak you couldn't afford, and bragged about user acquisition models that a first-year business student could see were entirely fabricated. Your logistics software is not revolutionary, Damon. It is a poorly coded derivative mess built on outdated infrastructure. My technical team reviewed your proprietary code and they actually laughed. They told me it looked like it was programmed by a sleep-deprived intern. Your company is a hollow shell game designed to siphon investor capital into your own pockets to fund your ridiculous lifestyle. If my company is so pathetic," Damon stammered, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper, "why did you even take the meeting? You are a billionaire, Julian. You don't waste your time with small startups unless you see something valuable. Why did you invite me to your club? Why did you look at my financials?" "I did not take the meeting because I saw value in your company, Damon. I took the meeting because my wife asked me to." The words landed like physical blows. Damon physically flinched, his eyes darting wildly toward me and then back to Julian. "What?" he gasped, his voice barely audible. "My wife is the senior crisis strategist for my portfolio," Julian explained, his voice echoing with authority. "She is the woman who actually builds the wealth you have spent the evening pretending to possess. When she saw your Series A pitch deck cross the desk of one of my junior analysts, she recognized your name. She told me who you were. She told me about the $40,000 debt she paid off for you. She told me about the joint savings account you drained the night before your anniversary. She told me how you funded the cheap, cloudy diamond ring currently sitting on your wife's finger. Nia asked me to arrange a meeting with you," Julian continued, taking another step forward until he was standing over Damon, who was practically cowering at the edge of the stage. "She did not want me to invest in you, she wanted me to open the door just wide enough so you would enthusiastically walk right in and hand over your financial history. She wanted my forensic accountants to audit your books to see where her stolen money went 6 years ago. And because you are so blinded by your own narcissism and greed, you practically tripped over yourself to hand us the documents she needed. You audited my books," Damon whispered, his eyes wide with sheer panic. "You had no right, that is confidential corporate information. You signed a non-disclosure agreement." Julian smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that did absolutely nothing to warm his eyes. "I signed a standard preliminary review agreement which legally permits my team to verify the absolute accuracy of the financial claims you present during a pitch. And Damon, what my team found was not just a failing company. We found a massive, sprawling web of intentional federal financial crimes. You stood on this stage tonight and bragged about securing millions in capital," Julian said, his voice rising slightly, ensuring every single person in the back rows heard the undeniable truth. "You pledged $50,000 to a charity while your employees are facing eviction. But the reality is far more disgusting. We tracked the capital you did manage to raise from your initial angel investors. You did not put that money into product development. You did not pay your software engineers. You funneled over $800,000 into offshore shell accounts to pay for Kira's luxury cars, your rented mansions, and the fake designer bags she loves to parade around town." "That is a lie," Kira screamed, dropping her hands and pointing a shaking finger at Julian. "We built this company, we worked hard. You are just making this up to protect her." "We didn't just find the offshore accounts," Julian continued, ignoring Kira's hysterical outburst completely. "We found the forged revenue projections you submitted to the Federal Small Business Administration to secure your initial startup loans. We found the doctored payroll taxes. You have been deliberately defrauding the United States government for over 3 years. Damon, you built a house of cards out of stolen money and federal wire fraud." Damon dropped to his knees, his legs simply stopped functioning. He landed heavily on the wooden stage, his head bowed, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. "Please," he whimpered, a pathetic, broken sound that echoed through the microphone still lying on the floor near his knees. "Please, Julian, do not do this. I will pay it back. I will sell the assets. I will give Nia her money back with interest. Just keep this quiet, we can handle this privately." Julian looked down at him with absolute, unadulterated contempt. You do not have any assets to sell, Damon. Your company is bankrupt, your house is in foreclosure, and your sister's car is currently being towed from the valet lot outside. You possess absolutely nothing of value, and as for handling this privately, you lost that privilege the absolute second you decided to stand on a public stage and insult my wife's trauma. I am a fiduciary, Damon, Julian said, his voice ringing with absolute finality. When a company presents me with fraudulent financial documents attempting to secure venture capital, I am legally obligated to report that fraud to the proper authorities. It is standard corporate policy. Julian reached into the inner pocket of his bespoke tuxedo jacket and pulled out a crisp white envelope, holding it up for Damon to see. My legal team spent the entire afternoon compiling a massive comprehensive file containing every single forged document, every illegal wire transfer, and every stolen dollar you enthusiastically handed over to us last week. At exactly 5 o'clock this evening, my lead attorney personally hand-delivered that file to the regional director of the Internal Revenue Service and the White-Collar Crime Division of the FBI. They are fully aware of your Chapter 11 filing. Julian continued, sliding the envelope back into his pocket. And they are fully aware that you attempted to hide over $800,000 in stolen investor capital during the bankruptcy proceedings. Your accounts are permanently frozen, your passports have been legally flagged, and based on the conversation I had with the federal prosecutor this morning, I would highly suggest you skip the rest of this networking event and use your remaining time to find a very good, very expensive criminal defense attorney. Though considering your current financial status, you will likely be relying on a public defender. Kira looked down at her husband, the man she had just claimed was a brilliant visionary, the man she had bragged about building a legacy with, and her face contorted with absolute revulsion. Instead, she took a deliberate step away from him, carefully lifting the hem of her ruined dress to avoid brushing against his shaking shoulders. Julian, Kira said, her voice dropping to a soft, breathy whisper that she clearly intended to sound vulnerable and alluring. She took a slow, hesitant step toward him, clasping her hands together in front of her chest. You have to believe me, I had absolutely no idea about any of this. Damon controlled all the finances. He handled all the banking and the investors. He lied to me just as much as he lied to the federal government. I am a victim in this too, Julian, Kira pleaded, taking another step closer, batting her eyelashes and tilting her head. He manipulated me, he forced me to go along with this grand illusion. I never agreed with his actions. I told him over and over again that we needed to be honest. But he was so incredibly obsessed with power and status. He is a monster, Julian, but you know I am not like him. You know I have always admired you. I have always respected your strength and your true success. Please, Kira whispered, reaching a trembling hand out as if she wanted to touch Julian's bespoke tuxedo jacket, but stopping just short of making physical contact. Do not let his crimes ruin my life. You have the power to keep my name out of the federal investigation. You can protect me. I would do absolutely anything to prove my loyalty to you. Anything you ask, you would do absolutely anything. Julian asked, his voice dangerously low, echoing through the quiet ballroom. Kira nodded eagerly, a desperate, hopeful smile breaking through her fake tears. Yes, she breathed, her eyes widening. Anything, I just need a fresh start, a real man to take care of me. What is this? Damon whispered, his voice broken. This, Julian announced, his voice booming through the speakers with absolute ruthless authority, is the digital footprint of a traitor. You see, Damon, while you were busy stealing money from your elderly mother and your hard-working employees to fund your wife's luxury lifestyle, your wife was busy desperately trying to secure a massive financial upgrade. Hey handsome, Kira had written in one message, accompanied by a highly edited photograph of herself lounging in a luxury hotel suite, a hotel suite Damon had undoubtedly paid for with stolen investor capital. I am so bored with boys playing business. I need a real man who knows how to treat a woman. When are you going to let me show you a good time? You, Julian, she stammered, taking a stumbling step backward. You kept those? I keep everything, Julian replied coldly. When a married woman begins harassing my private accounts, sending me unsolicited inappropriate photographs, and begging me to fund her lifestyle, I instruct my security team to document every single interaction. It is standard protocol to protect myself from extortion. I found your desperate attempts to become my mistress incredibly pathetic. I know Damon is struggling, Kira's massive projected text read. He is weak, he does not have what it takes to run with the big dogs. I am completely exhausted pretending to respect him. If you fund my private lifestyle, Julian, I will leave him tomorrow. I will walk away from this fake marriage and be completely yours. Just say the word. You called me Barren tonight, Kira, I said, my voice breaking the silence, echoing with a cold, heavy finality. You stood on this stage and told this entire room that Damon left me because I was a broken incubator. You bragged that you were a real woman who knew how to satisfy a man. You claimed you were the ultimate prize, but the absolute truth, the reality projected right behind you, is that for the past 8 months, you have been desperately throwing yourself at my husband, begging him to make you his secret mistress. You offered to abandon the man you stole from me just so you could secure a bigger bank account. And my husband did not even respect you enough to reply to a single one of your pathetic messages. Kira let out a loud, ragged gasp, burying her face in her hands as the sheer weight of her total public humiliation crashed down upon her. She had been publicly exposed not just as a fraud, but as a desperate, treacherous gold digger who failed spectacularly at seducing the husband of the woman she hated most in the world. You offered to leave me, Damon croaked, his voice shaking with absolute rage and profound heartbreak. I stole from my mother for you, I ruined my entire life to give you everything you demanded, and you were begging another man to sleep with you. Damon, Kira dropping her hands and reaching out toward him. It is not what it looks like. I was just trying to secure an investor. I was trying to play the game to get us the money. Do not touch me, Damon screamed, slapping her hands away with such violent force that Kira stumbled backward, tripping over the hem of her dress and falling hard onto the polished wooden floor right beside the puddle of spilled wine and shattered glass. Oh, and Damon, Julian said, his voice cutting through the heavy air with casual, devastating precision. Since we are completely clearing the air regarding your assets tonight, there is one final piece of corporate housekeeping we need to address. Your sister, Chanice, was very vocal earlier this evening about the brand new Range Rover you supposedly purchased for her. Julian continued, his tone conversational but laced with lethal intent. She was bragging about your generosity. My wife already gracefully informed her about the predatory 22% interest rate attached to that subprime lease. But what Nia did not mention was the specific financial institution that issued that toxic loan. The holding company that underwrote your sister's massive auto loan was quietly acquired by my venture capital firm 3 months ago, Julian stated. We own the debt, Damon, which means I personally own that vehicle, and because she is 2 months delinquent, I authorized the repossession order this afternoon. The tow truck did not just happen to be in the neighborhood tonight. I dispatched it personally to collect my property, and that beautiful 5-bedroom house you and Kira are currently living in, Julian added, his voice dropping to a low, chilling pitch. The beautiful estate you mortgaged to secretly fund your illegal offshore accounts. The bank holding that specific mortgage was motivated to offload your debt. My real estate division successfully purchased your mortgage last week. You have been in default for 90 days, Damon. The legal grace period has officially expired today. At 8 o'clock tonight, while you were standing in this beautiful room drinking expensive champagne and preparing to proudly mock my wife, my property management team arrived at your residence, Julian explained smoothly. They changed the locks on every single door, they activated a new security system, and they taped an official expedited eviction notice to your front door. You do not have a home to return to tonight, Damon. You do not have a functioning company. You do not have a wife who actually loves you. You have nothing left in this world. The finality of Julian's devastating words hung in the air, an undeniable verdict that officially sealed Damon's and permanent ruin. For a long, agonizing moment, the grand ballroom remained silent, digesting the sheer scale of the financial and social execution they had just witnessed. My car, Chani screamed hysterically. They took my beautiful car right out of the private valet lot. She spotted Damon being dragged forcefully by the security guards and launched herself aggressively toward him. You ruined my entire life. Shanice shrieked, clawing viciously at her brother's ruined rented velvet jacket. You promised me you had the money. You destroyed my perfect credit score. In the freezing rain of the circular valet driveway, the toxic pressure cooker of their fake marriage violently exploded. Damon lunged toward his wife, his face twisted into an ugly mask of pure venom. You absolute parasite, he screamed. I destroyed my entire life for you, and you were trying to sell yourself to the very man who just ruined me. Kira lunged right back at him. A gold digger, she shrieked. How can I possibly be a gold digger when you do not have any actual gold? Damon, you are a broke, pathetic fake millionaire. You are the biggest fraud I have ever met in my entire miserable life. Chanice joined the brutal verbal assault, actively hitting Damon aggressively in the chest with her wet fists. You forced me to sign that predatory lease. You completely destroyed my financial future just so you could look like a big shot to your fake high society friends.